Okay, good afternoon, everybody. So let's continue from where we left off yesterday. So yeah, so let me present my screen. So there was a question before all of you got here. So there was a question as to what is a degenerate distribution. So here is an example of a degenerate distribution. Typically, whenever you have a probabilistic distribution, right, it takes some value probabilistically, which means it is not certain that that particular value happens. So for instance, in the example here, the random variable x takes the value 1 with 0.3 and 2 with 0.7. Okay, so this is not degenerate, it's a proper distribution. It is not taking probability, I mean, there is some uncertainty involved, right? Whereas in a degenerate distribution, what happens is it takes a particular value with the probability 1. Okay, here it takes value 1 with probability 1, but it could be any case like probability x equal to c, it takes a value 1. Right, so this comes in the context of back learning. We said that there is a underlying fixed joint distribution pxy, which can be written via Bayes rule in this manner, right? So when we say p of y given x is degenerate, it means that y is a function of x and it is completely deterministic. There is no randomness involved. Okay, so whenever something is degenerate, it is you know the thing that is going to happen, and surely you know what it is going to happen. Okay, so it's also called as almost surely in the language of probability theory. Okay, I think good many people have still turned up. That's nice. All right. So let's get started. Something I wanted to do. Okay. All right. So now coming back to yesterday's discussion. So let us quickly try to wrap up that discussion. So yesterday we were we were trying to develop the framework of consistency of empirical risk minimization. The topic that we are discussing is consistency of empirical risk minimization, right? So again, I keep repeating this because it is so important that you understand this, because if this is not clear, then the next thing on VC dimension is meaningless, right? So what we have, as usual, we have input space, we have y, which is chosen to be 0, 1. We have the hypothesis bag. Okay, and each hypothesis in the bag, h, is a function from x to some action space A. Then we have the loss function, which is actually whatever is the true label, what action you took, what is the loss arising due to that. Here we saw several losses, right? 0, 1 loss, we saw least mean squared loss, we saw. Okay, and then you will see hinge loss when we do SVM. Okay, all these things we have seen. And then what you would like to minimize is out of sample performance, which is called as the risk of a classifier. Again, risk we have seen in the context of the Bayes classifier. So this is nothing new. So this is just expectation of over xy, okay, L of y comma h of x. Okay, so this we cannot do because we don't know the underlying distribution pxy. What we have is like we have identical and independent samples from this, which is called as SN. This is your training data, xi, yi. This is given to us. Okay, so instead of this true distribution, we have only samples, right? So these are all realistic things. So we can't do the true risk. Instead, what we look is we measure what is called as empirical risk. Okay, this is 1 over n summation L of yi h of xi, right? And then what we would like is the best classifier which does best in the true out of sample performance, which means when you deploy it in the world, how good it is. We want that, right? This is what we want from our bag. We want the best from our bag in the sense that how well it does when you deploy it. That is what we would want. All our learning algorithm can guarantee is it can only give you within your bag, HN, within your bag, it can give you the empirical risk minimizing thing it can give you, right? So this is the entire framework of learning, and everything that you have seen so far in this course and whatever remaining things are there in the course in the topic of supervised learning falls in this framework, right? So you can just change y to real number and all of this still continues to hold. Okay, but the consistency aspect that we are studying is only for classification, but without the y space, if you allow y to be anything, it continues to remain. Okay, so all of these things are fine. So then I walked you through what you would like, what are our goals. So we would like H star, right? Can we get H star? So this was our first box. So that we cannot get. I mean, it's not clear as to what that means. So instead what we will say is, if you take enough number of samples, whatever our learning algorithm is doing, can we get that as n tends to infinity? And how do we know that is happening? Again, that is you measure what is called as you measure the true risk of your Hn star, and then you see whether it goes to the true risk of your best classifier in the bag as n tends to infinity. Okay, so this box over here is what we desire, and this is called as consistency of empirical risk minimization. We also saw yesterday through a simple observation. It was very simple, so I'm calling it observation. We said that whenever we have R of Hn hat star going to R of H star, okay, what we get, we also get one more desirable property, which is you can actually look at the performance of your data in the data error. You can see this is the data error, right? This is what you can report after training. You can report what is the empirical risk you got, and that itself converges to the best risk in your bag as n tends to infinity. So we did all of this, and then we also saw that important theorem that we saw yesterday. Okay, so the theorem that we saw yesterday was consistency of empirical risk minimization, okay, is achieved if and only if for all epsilon and so if it's achieved for if and only for all epsilon and delta that you choose, I can produce an n such that so what was that? So probability of supremum over my entire bag. Okay, I look at Rn of H, okay, Rn hat of H minus R of H greater than epsilon is less than delta for all n greater than or equal to n. Okay, so the greater than or equal to we put, I sometimes miss it, but that doesn't really change too many things, but there is a greater than or equal to. But nevertheless, so what are the important things we saw? So this looks very suspiciously similar to weak law of large numbers. This also we saw. So in weak law of large numbers, what happens? You fix an H belonging to H, okay, and then for all epsilon delta greater than 0, there exists an n which can depend on three things. It can depend on H, it can depend on epsilon, it can depend on delta. Okay, and in that what happens? Weak law just says that as you have more and more samples of your random variable, empirical estimate of your random variable, that goes close to R of H. Okay, for this thing is less than or equal to delta for all n greater than n. So here, this n depends on this H. Okay, so what we are asking is a n that is independent of this. So yesterday there was a clarification that I needed to make. So I stated yesterday what I said is uniform convergence. Yes, so in uniform convergence, I said that if you take the entire thing, uniform convergence of like weak law of large numbers with uniform convergence, if you want to have, I said that probability Rn at H minus Rh greater than epsilon, okay, is less than or equal to delta for all n greater than n, and for all H, I said this, right? So for all epsilon delta greater than 0, there exists an n. So this actually what happens is I said this is enough to guarantee consistency. As it turns out, if you, so let me box this constraint. Okay, so let's call this condition, this entire thing, okay, this entire condition over here. Let me call this as 1. And this thing that I stated, let me call it as 2. Okay. As it turns out, if 1 happens, you are guaranteed for 2. Okay. But there are examples where 2 does not imply 1. Okay. So Siddharth was right in the sense to point out that these two are not exactly equivalent. So this is a much stronger condition. So what we require in the consistency is we require this. This is also actually independent of H, right? So it is quite close if you see. So this N only depends upon epsilon and delta, does not depend on H, because you're looking at the like the maximum error that can come. Okay. So this I wanted to clarify right in the start. Okay. So I think henceforth, when we are going to look at, we will only focus on this theorem. Okay, so I think I should ask here if there are any questions. Can I quickly see in the chat if you have any questions? Is everything clear? Siddharth? I don't hear from Siddharth. I hope you're fine. Devyani?
Sir, I'm not offhand convinced, but I think if I read it up once.
So where is the issue? You can ask.
So the 1 and 2, why you're saying that they would not be?
Okay, so 1 implies 2. Why that is happening, and why 2 implies 1 will not happen? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I think what I will do, I will give you a small exercise to do later on. I will, in the practice questions, I will give you, and I will point out. So that will be something just for you to try. Okay, it will not be part of the syllabus. I will make it clear in that exercise. So then when you work it out, you will realize that 1 implies 2, but 2 does not imply 1. So for now, you can just take my word, but later I will give you an exercise to try. Is that fine?
Sir. Yes, sir.
I mean, otherwise I will spend another half an hour, and it will just waste the time. So I don't want to go there. As long as this is convincing, as long as you can understand this, then I'm okay. So each of the phrases here, do you follow?
Yes, sir. That's fine.
Yeah. Okay. So Siddharth Shah, everything okay, I hope. I know you have some bad internet connectivity. If you can just type in chat also, that should be fine. Okay, any case. So I don't know what's up. Okay, all right. So moving on. So now we will start with this thing. So now, if at all you want to, given a problem, if you want to learn, you better have condition 1 to be true. Okay. See, if you want to really deploy your learning algorithm in the field, okay, so you can hope that as you keep in the company, as you keep collecting more and more data, eventually you will have enough data that you can assume, even though that is strictly not true. But if you keep operating in the real world, right, you will always keep collecting data. See, big companies have huge amount of data. So data is okay. So that is one part of the story. But the other part is with the choice of your bag, right? So how does the bag come in? It is here. Okay, so this is your choice of the bag, right? H is your bag. So if your bag has the property that if H satisfies 1, then learning is feasible. Okay, then you can actually use the learning algorithm that you are thinking of. Okay, so now what we will do is we will look at under what conditions can we get 1. Okay, and that will lead us to the discussion on VC dimension. Okay, so to understand this one, I think this is the key part here, right? So this is like your coin tosses. This is like your mu, right? So the number of coin tosses that you are making, how close it is to the actual mu. Okay, so this error should reduce uniformly through your bag. Okay, that is what you want. You shouldn't have like few of the things errors are going down fast, but for few of them the error controlling of the error requires more sample. You want a uniform way in which you can control the error, right? So supremum is capturing that the how much the deviation is happening. Okay, so that way you can understand this. Okay, so I hope the box statement is clear. Okay, so it is exactly like your weak law of large numbers, but you have put the supremum in the probability, and then your n does not depend on h, because this is like in some sense it is no longer relevant once you put it inside the probability, right? The h doesn't matter. You're looking over all possible h's and you're seeing how each h deviates from its empirical estimate, and you are checking that number, the probability that the deviation is more than epsilon. That is what you're checking. So in some sense, this is like a stronger form of weak law of large numbers, and it is also called uniform convergence. Okay, so this is what we have. So whenever your bag satisfies this, then we can hope to learn. Okay, so now what we are going to do is we are going to look at few bags where this kind of a property is satisfied. Okay, that is the discussion that we will start next. So we will, since we know this condition is true, so we will only look at this henceforth. The theorem need not be stated. All we need to do is, given a bag, is this condition satisfied? Okay, so that is what we will do next. So first case that we will look at is first case h is equal to h1, h2 all the way till hm. Okay, so what is this case? This case is called as a finite bag, right? So there is only finite number of cases. The cardinality of h, the bag itself has finite hypothesis. Okay, so this is the case we will study first, and we will ask the question whether we are able to satisfy this boxed condition of uniform convergence. Okay, so that's what we will do now. So now let me ask somebody. So if can someone state weak law of large numbers for h1 with h1 as the classifier that we are choosing from this bag? So can somebody say what is weak law of large numbers? So let's say, let me write this. Fix h1 belonging to h. So what is the weak law of large numbers stating?
So probability of empirical risk of h1,
which is Rn hat of h1. Yeah,
the true risk of h1,
R of h1, correct.
So mod of this quantity. If that is greater than epsilon, then the probability should be less than delta.
Yeah, so this is epsilon and delta that I choose. I mean that you are choosing. Okay, so greater than 0. I can produce an n1 such that this happens, right? So n1 I'm choosing because it depends on h1, right? Weak law, just the weak law doesn't tell uniform convergence. Okay, so for all n greater than n1. Okay, so like this, what we can do is for if I fix any hi belonging to h, right? You get for all epsilon delta greater than 0, there exists ni such that this happens. Hi minus R of hi delta, yeah. So this is for all n greater than n2. So this epsilon and delta, if like this, when you have, what we can do is we can pull all of the for all epsilon and delta and write it together. So what I mean to say is this box you can just club here, and fix one epsilon and delta, and for every hi I can produce one n1, n2 like this. Okay. So now what I will do next. So for this is not n2, I'm sorry, this is ni, right? Because I have picked the ith bag. So now if I have to evaluate what is the probability that supremum of h belonging to h, okay, r of h, rn of h minus r of h greater than epsilon, okay, what is the probability this happens if I have to fix, if I have to check? How do we do that? So now if you want to understand this, right, so let us look at something. So call the event E1. Okay, so this is an event E1 where R1 of H minus Rn of H1 minus R of H1 is greater than epsilon. Okay, so if the supremum, so if the supremum is greater than epsilon, so I think we should do the other way. Okay, so let me write this properly. So let us call the event that it is less than epsilon as E1. Okay, and so similarly E2 I can write. So in general EI I can write as Rn hat of Hi minus R of Hi is less than epsilon. Okay, if the supremum is greater than epsilon, then at least one of them should be greater than epsilon. Correct? Does that make sense? See, if I am saying the supremum is bigger than epsilon, either at least E1 or E2 or E3 or E4, at least one of them should have happened. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that means this is equal to probability that at least one of them is greater, no? So you have to look at the complement. Union of EI complement. So let me repeat once again. See, I am saying that the worst classifier, one of them is having a deviation greater than epsilon. If that has happened, something like that has happened for a particular, like in some point it has happened like that. So at least one of them should have violated. Then only we can count for it. Okay, so that is what is the meaning here in this term. So each of the EIs are looking at for less than epsilon. So the union means it will be like this. I don't know if this is clear. Let me just ask in the chat.
Minor correction, that should be less than equal to epsilon, the EIs, I think.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Yeah, correct. Okay, but in any case, the discussion still is not that far away. But
Yes,
anything?
yes.
Yeah, so is this clear to people why this is happening? Can I quickly check in chat, please?
Sir?
Yeah.
Sir, but what if the event which is occurring is not the supremum? I mean, the EI which is not less than epsilon is not the supremum. Then
It is not the supremum, but one of them should have happened, right? See, if you are counting the probability where, okay, so let me draw a figure that will help. Okay, so so let us say, let me draw a Venn diagram. So Venn diagram you typically use in probability. So let us say this is E1 complement. This shaded region is E1 complement. Okay, so this is the place where the E1 has made an error more than epsilon. Okay, so this is strictly bigger than epsilon. H1 has made an error bigger than epsilon. Likewise, you will have E2. Either it will overlap or it may not overlap, something like this. E3 could be like this. So this is E2 complement. This is E3 complement. Okay, so now when you take supremum, all of these things will come. See, when I am taking supremum, it doesn't mean that there is a single H which will be counted. There will be multiple H's may come. So, see, if you visualize, so this is a probability space, right? So imagine that this is all the space that is here. Okay, sometimes in this space, H1 makes mistakes. In this space, H2 make mistakes. In this space, H3 makes mistakes. But I am looking at supremum means I'm free to sometimes go from H1 to H2, H2 to H3 like that. Nitish?
So it's not fully clear, but I'll think about it.
Okay, so let me see what. So this is actually related to whatever Devyani was asking very early, right? So how is this guaranteeing the other thing, that uniform thing that I wrote before? So it's very similar to that discussion. Okay, so see, when you let me see if I can make it clear. We have to go to a space where this thing is not exactly like this, but something else. Then it will get clear. Okay, so what we will do is we will look at an example. So small digression. Okay. So this RNHI minus RH, right? This thing, I will call it as some other new random variable. The modulus of this, let me call it as a random variable xi. Okay. So that is what it is. And let's suppose there are 3 values of xi. So I'm going to plot it. So assume that your underlying space is uniform 0 to 1. Okay, so this is your underlying space. So Px, something like that. So now H1, so this is your underlying space. Now H1, what it will be is that it will be making error in this region, 0 to 0.1. Okay, H2 is making an error from 0.1 to 0.2. Okay, like that I will have till H10. This is H1, this is X1, this is X2, and all the way I will have till X10. X10 is making an error from 0.9 to 0.10. 0.9 to 1. Okay, so this is all the places where each of these thing is making an error. Okay, so what is so now probability that I make an error, so this is less than epsilon, right? So let us say epsilon is 0.2. Okay, so what is the probability that x1 is less than 0.2? X1 is equal to so this error is less than 0.2. Can someone tell? So this is the place where the error is happening. Okay, this region is where error is happening, and the error is more than 0. Okay, this is so this number, let us say it takes a value 1. Okay, so now all of the other places the error is 0. So let me not call it 0.2. I can take even a smaller number, 0.01. Okay, so 0.01. So now, Nitish, can you tell me what is the probability that x1, so x1 is less than 0.01. What is this value?
So it should be 1 minus x1 is greater than 0.01.
Yeah, so that is like something like 0.9, right? Yeah. So, okay, let me ask the other way, because we are always looking at greater than epsilon, right? So we should not ask this way. So let me just clear this. So this is probability x1 is greater than epsilon, right? So this is equal to 0.01, 0.1. Okay. So my delta, let me choose it as 0.2. So first of all, the probability, if I look at for H1, this term, so this is actually satisfying the condition that probability Rn of H1 minus R of H is greater than epsilon. This is less than 0.01. Is less than 0.1, which is less than 0.2, right? So less than delta. Okay, so what I am saying is this is like your a representation of your even complement. Okay, but when you are taking the supremum, all of this will add up, because in this region x1 is the one where error is happening. In this region x2 is the one where the error is happening. In this region x10 is region where the error is happening, right? So when you take supremum, you may be switching from various hypotheses. I don't know how else I can make it more clearer. If someone asks me a question, it might help.
Sir, what is that graph? The graph you are making is not. What is the axis?
So
can you
okay,
label the axis?
so yeah. So this is 0 to x. Okay, so this is your features. Suppose this is your features. You are making this difference, right? X1 is capturing how much I am deviating from my true estimate at that point. Okay. I think this is getting a little confusing. Maybe if I can draw your attention to the Venn diagram, perhaps that will be more useful.
This was the question in my mind, that what we are saying is that in several cases, one of them might emerge as the one which is crossing epsilon, and the others might not. So that is actually what is on the right side, that it is accounting for the whole of like every one of them to be in their complementary case, and the left side is saying that yes, my minimum upper bound is greater than epsilon. So the counter case then that which naturally comes into my mind is that on the left hand side, it is just talking about one quantity being greater than epsilon.
Yeah.
But on the right hand side, we also have cases where there are multiple quantities greater than epsilon, which like might not even be nated on the left hand side.
Yes. So that is where it's precisely what you have said is correct. So if this happens, right? If this happens, then this will happen. That's what you're saying. Because one of the fellows has deviated. So okay. So if one fellow has deviated, we are guaranteed that this happens.
That implication is clear.
That implication is clear. Now what I'm saying is, so that implication, if you want to understand, you can take the Venn diagram. Even will be this. So this is entirely so this is the space of all your things, right? So this is your underlying probability. Whatever the probability that we are taking over, I'm just assuming that you can represent as a Venn diagram. So E1 will be that, E2 will be that. So all of you are convinced in the non-intersection region, what it means anyway, that is the same. So that you agree, right? But what I'm saying is, when you take supremum, we have to look at everything's errors. So in the sense, you have to look at points, you have to add up all the errors these people are making. Because you are taking supremum inside the probability, what happens is you have to see what are the times where H1 is deviating more than epsilon, add it with like what is the time when H2 is making more errors more than epsilon, and take the probability of the entire thing together. Okay, so let me try to say this way. So you are a bank, okay? You don't want your net. So you are a bank. You don't want your net loans, bad loans, to cross epsilon. You don't want your net bad loans to cross epsilon. Okay. So it is important that nobody individually crosses epsilon. That is also true. Nobody individually can cross epsilon. Okay. So, however, it is also true that all of these people put together also shouldn't cross. See, so this is the like you consider this is as your bad loan condition. Okay. So what is the total bad loan made by one person? So this may be less than epsilon, but when I combine over several people, okay, so when I combine that should not also cross epsilon. So that is what is the difference.
Sir,
Yeah.
so, but supremum does not mean the combined efforts of all the individuals. No? Because suppose there are 10 numbers valued 1 to 10. So the supremum of these 10 numbers is 10. So what we want is 10 should not be greater than our epsilon. We want a probability that 10 greater than our epsilon. So then why are we adding the
No. These are random quantities, right? So this RNH and RH are random quantities. So what is the randomization taken over? Let us first look at that. So can you tell me what is the randomization here?
so here H is random.
No, H is fixed, right? So H belongs to H. H is fixed. This is fixed. See, H belongs to H. I am not picking that randomly. What is varying? This is also fixed. This is also not random. However, Rn hat, this is random. On what points I evaluate it, it is random. Isn't it? See, empirical risk, I am evaluating on some samples. So what is the samples that I have chosen? That is random. Correct?
Yes, yes.
So only the samples Sn is random. Okay. So now on some samples, so now you have to consider the entire space of your X, right? So this is your entire space, this Venn diagram. Okay. When you pick samples from this, sometimes it will make error, sometimes it will not make error. Okay. The points when you choose those points where it makes error, that you are calling it as even complement. This is all the points where even has made error. On the same points, E2 need not make error because E2 or H2 is a different classifier. On those points, it may be fine. It may still be okay if you choose that subset Sn, right?
Yes, sir.
So now if I visualize all this, so this is a little bit, you have to imagine a little bit. So what I'm saying is if you consider the entire space of how your randomness is happening, E1 is this space where H1 makes error, E2 is this, E3 is this. Okay, so E3 complement, sorry. So basically, if I have to look at the total thing that I'm looking, right? It is not just looking at one classifier at a time. This supremum, if it was outside, that was a different case. But if when it's inside, what I'm looking at is each classifier when it is making an error more than epsilon, I can switch. So I'm looking at, in some sense, every possible combination. Like I am considering the sum total of all the errors that I'm making and looking if that crosses epsilon. Okay, let's go back to the point where Sn comes, right? So Sn is a random thing. So when I have some points when I choose, it will be not making an error. Some other points when I choose, it will make error, right? So H1 and H2 may make errors on different area in my omega space, if I can visualize it like this. So this is just a representation for you to make easy. This is not necessarily how it would be. But what I'm saying is, depending upon what samples you choose, some classifiers will make error, some will not. By making error, I'm saying they will cross epsilon. Okay. So when I'm looking in the entire space, I just cannot look at each classifier separately. I have to look at all the classifier. Whenever they make an error, I have to collect it because the supremum is capturing that. If somebody asks any questions, then I can say, and then it will become clearer. Unfortunately, teaching is like that, right? So I may be knowing the things in my head, but to get it out, I need some catalysts. So is that clear or not? I don't know.
Sir, again, like in the regions where it is actually, like, suppose H1 was actually the supremum and all the others were lower.
No. H1 is supremum for a particular.
In the region, in the Venn diagram region, where
let me write this. Okay, H1 for a particular sample Sn, H1 will be max of H. Let me just write this. Okay, I know your question is slightly different, but let me just write this. Right. So Rn depends upon Sn. R of H1. So this may be maximum here. Yeah. Go ahead. What you're saying, Siddharth.
Yes, sir. So in the region where H1 is actually the maximum out of all the possible cases,
Yeah.
if we are considering its probability of happening, like
Yes,
probability
yes.
of
That is P of even complement. The probability that
Yeah,
H1 is more than epsilon. So likewise, we have to look at when H2 crosses epsilon, when H3 crosses epsilon. Okay, the overlapping region is good. If the overlapping region is more, then we are happy. Okay, but what we are saying is we will look at all the worst performing things in each sample point. So like E1, E2, E3, E4 like this. The net sum of all these things, I don't want that to cross epsilon, right? That entire thing should be less than delta.
Yes, sir. I got the intuitive idea. Yes, I got it.
How about others, Nidish?
So I didn't still get the intuition, so but I'll maybe
Oh.
talk to Siddharth later. Or
No, but you can say something, then we can probably try to clarify.
yes, sir.
You
Sir,
tell me where is the issue. Let us try to go through together because I think it will help others as well. Yeah.
Sure, sir. So the way I interpret the statement on the left hand side, that the probability of supremum of H and then the difference, the way I do it is for a particular fixed Sn. Now I have m classifiers in my bag, and I'll find out the Rn hat H minus R of H for each of these classifiers, and I'll see which of them is the maximum. And if that is greater than epsilon, then I'll say plus one in my for loop. Then again I'll choose another Sn, and again I'll see which of the H's is giving me the maximum, and if that H is greater than epsilon, I'll again give a plus one in my for loop, and so
Okay.
on.
Okay.
I'll do for many times.
Yeah, there is a problem there. So let me write in the language that you have said. Okay, so first let me clear out some screen. Okay, so let me just clear this space. So you are writing a for loop. That's a good idea. So let's do that. So oh God, how do I clear this? Okay, so so now what you have to do, so you said you will write a for loop, right? So first what I have to do is for all small omega in omega. So what that means is I will pick a sample. So this you can think as a sample Sn. Okay, first you have to do this. Do you understand how that will work? So first you pick all the samples that you can take from your bag. Okay, then you evaluate for each H belonging to H. Okay, you evaluate what is that? So each Hi belonging to H, you evaluate Rn hat Hi, okay, minus Rhi on the sample omega. So this one, let me write it, omega minus R of H. If this is greater than epsilon, then epsilon, you add epsilon to my bag. So this is my event where this happens. So initially I will start with an empty set. Okay, I will take all possible subsets of my omega. I will evaluate every time this happens, right? I will take a union of that particular sample. I will add it. Nidish?
Yes, sir. Yes.
And then I will ask what is the probability of E at the end.
Yes, sir.
So this is a little bit different thing than what you described, right?
Yes, actually, I described if this difference is greater than epsilon, then I'll maintain a counter.
Yeah. So you what did you say? So what you said, we will write that as well. Tell.
Yes. So up till the difference, everything is the same.
Okay.
And then after that, if this difference is greater than epsilon, then I maintain a counter for this particular Hi, and then after I finished this for loop for Hi, after I've considered all these omegas, then I'll see how many times it has come 1 upon the total number of omegas I had.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So you will. Yeah. So if there were only so But this is what this is doing is, it is not just doing for one HI, it is doing for all the HIs and collecting all the omegas. Right? Do you see the difference? See, I'm not just interested. So for a particular sample, I will see whether H1 violated, whether H2 violated, whether H3 violated, like that. Okay. And then I will collect across all the things in my bag and I will ask what's the probability of that.
So,
Nidish, yeah.
yes, sir. So is this the way how we interpret the left-hand side statement, sir?
Yeah, because it is so probability is taken outside, right? So I have to look at how many times error is happening. So at various points, okay, various omegas, there will be error here, right? So you have to collect across all the classifiers and see the total error. It does not have to be a single number. It can come across different H1s. It can come across H2, H3, all of them you can collect. Okay, whenever they are more than epsilon, you add that in your bag. It doesn't matter which H made that error.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so let me see if I can think of some simple example. Yeah.
I have a simplifying, like in the Venn diagram only I got the intuition. So the intuition is this, that we are actually taking the union. So
Yeah.
in the cases where there is no intersection, there it is like
One of them is the
one of them is the
maximum.
undisputed
Maximum.
And the point of confusion for most of us would be that what happens in the case of intersection? Why are we considering the probability? But actually we need to see that it is the union. So only one of them will get counted, and consider this, that only the maximum's probability will get counted. So
yeah, because it is not getting count. Yeah, so because you are taking, if two are having maximum, we are only accounting just one. We are looking at the total area.
We are only accounting for one, and let's say that one is the maximum one, assuming let's say is the case. So then we can actually see, if we break down the left hand side probability into different domains, and then say that we are only taking maximum and counting once, then it will actually get converted to union.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's quite clear.
Yeah. Okay, good, Siddharth. That's good.
Sir?
Yeah.
So actually for me, it's like a bit easier to understand in terms of the loops, but like I'm confused that where did the maximum part go? Like where, like from how I understood was like in the second for loop, when we are taking for HIs, we are taking the maximum difference that we are getting, and then we are adding that.
Yeah, you're not the maximum. You see, you're only interested if you are crossing epsilon, right? So you're only interested if it crosses epsilon.
So but then we have written supremum there, so doesn't that mean sort of maximum difference?
No, there could be. Okay. So I see what you're saying.
So I'm just getting confused there.
Yeah. I think that we can clarify. So what we will do, so we will just say if the supremum crosses this, So if the supremum crosses epsilon, we add this. The point is what I'm trying to say. I think Devyani, what you said is correct anyway, but it doesn't change our discourse. See, if there are multiple people crossing epsilon, that anyway will be added once. That particular sample will be added, right?
Okay, sir. Yeah.
So if there are like H1, H2, H3, all of them are crossing epsilon, that will be accounted. That is like the intersection region, what Siddharth was telling. So that is anyway accounted.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it is, I'm unable to think of a simple example which is very analogous to this. It is very difficult to think off the fly in a class, but maybe I will try to explain it more details tomorrow. Okay, on tomorrow, as in when we meet next, which is on Tuesday. So so what is a for loop? So what we are doing is we will take all possible subsets from my space, right? This here, if you look at this probability on the left hand side, the only thing that is random is Rn hat, the empirical estimate that I'm making for a particular H. That is the only thing that is random here. Okay. and we are trying to find out for various samples, depending upon how you pick the sample, that may actually have a role whether it will cross epsilon or doesn't cross epsilon, right? That I think everybody should be comfortable. It depends on the sample. Sometimes if the samples are lucky for you, then you are definitely going to be less than epsilon. Okay. Now the point is that there could be multiple hypotheses for the same sample. Multiple hypotheses can violate. That is when we have this union, right? But the point is, whenever multiple violates, even the supremum will be bigger than epsilon, because whenever multiple violates, each of them is bigger than epsilon, one of them will be accounted. So in that sense, that condition is also accounted for. Okay, so everything that is happening here, so you just try to see for different samples what happens. Okay, so let us say there are only 10 samples I can draw, S1, S2, all the way till S10, right? So these are the 10 samples that are possible here. So when I talk about probability, I have to look at this event happening. When is that greater than epsilon into probability of S1, right? So that's what is the whole thing. So now what we are saying is, if any one of them happens, then guaranteed that the supremum at that particular sample will also cross epsilon. If any one of this happens at a particular S1, suppose this supremum is greater than epsilon, it necessarily must mean that there is some even where that violation is happening. In the other way around, if there are multiple people who are violating, the supremum will also violate for that sample. I don't know if that clarifies or confuses.
So it clarified for me at least. Now.
Okay. So can I just quickly check? So just to understand if where we stand. Okay, I don't know. It is a little more complicated. I didn't expect that we will have so much discussion, but that's good because this is the key part that we are going to use. So can I just quickly see if all of you follow? Rohit, what is your opinion here?
So I think I understood what everyone is saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I pretty much understood, but again, my understanding could be wrong also, but no, I think.
Why don't you summarize and tell whatever you have understood, if you don't mind?
No, please.
Okay. All right.
But I think at least the intuition, and I think I got it.
Yeah, Nidish, do you follow?
Yes, sir. Now I follow it, sir.
Yeah. So Sakar, Siddharth.
Yes, sir. I'm able to follow, sir.
Aditi, all of you, I don't see much response here.
Yes, sir. Like it is pretty much clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think this discussion, if you think of S1 to S10, I think that helps, right?
Yes, sir. Like as I said, like that for loop version is easier for me to understand.
Okay.
Yes, sir. The for loop helps.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. I'm hoping the rest of you who are not responding are still okay. So now, yeah. So that essentially is useful. Okay. So this is an important point that we have made. So probability that we are crossing epsilon is equal to this. So we will start with this and just show one additional thing and we will stop. Okay. Okay, so now, yeah, so let me just write what is even complement just to understand this. So even complement, this event is this is actually the event. So what is probability of even complement? So that is equal to probability that Rn hat of H1 minus R of H1 is greater than epsilon. Okay, so this is even complement. Okay. So, yeah. So now there are some things. So now whenever you have, so you have already seen, I described to you what was Chebyshev. right? So what was Chebyshev doing? So you have an empirical estimate Mn, which is 1 over n summation xi. You have expected value of x, which is equal to mu, right? So what Chebyshev gave us is probability that Mn minus mu is greater than some epsilon is less than or equal to variance of x divided by n epsilon square. Okay, so this is what is given by Chebyshev. Okay, so now see, remember what is our goal? We have to always remember what was our goal. We want to basically show that whenever you have a event like this, the supremum is greater than epsilon, I should be able to produce. So given an epsilon and delta, I should be able to produce an n which can achieve this, right? So that is what I would like to do. Given an epsilon and delta, I should be able to tell you what n to get. So the first case that we took was h1 to hm. What we understood is in the finite case, we can write the probabilities like this. So if you want to control this, you have to control the right hand side, which is probability of union of EI complements. So towards that we are heading. So one thing we can see is we already have one kind of inequality that we have seen, which is called a Chebyshev, which gives this. Okay, so this is a function. This is a good thing, right? The good thing is that this probability decreases as n increases. So as n increases, this variance of x over n epsilon square, this decreases because variance is fixed, epsilon square is fixed. As n increases, 1 over n decreases, right? So this Chebyshev is good, but what we instead use is called as Hoeffding's, because it is better. In what way it is better? Let me describe. So this is probability that Mn minus mu is greater than epsilon is less than 2 e power minus 2n epsilon squared by b minus a whole squared. Okay, so this is a much tighter bound. So let me explain each of these terms. So basically b and a are your random variable x lies between a and b. Okay, so that is what b and a are. A stands for. Okay, everything else you know. N stands for the number of samples, epsilon stands for the control that you want to exert. So this is a better thing, I say. Why is that? Can someone tell me why is that?
So because there n is in the exponent.
Yeah. So here, if we do a little bit algebra, what we can show, this is equal to k by n. Okay, whereas this entire business is like k dash by e power minus e power n, right? Siddharth, was it Siddharth who spoke?
Yes, sir.
So now this is what you are saying, right? So in that sense, Hoeffding is better. Does everybody understand why Hoeffding is better?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So now we will use Hoeffding in our thing. So here, so we want to bound P of even complement. Okay. So the loss function that we have chosen, that we typically choose is 0, 1, right? Loss function is 0, 1 loss function. So whatever be the loss, it has to be bound. My R is always between 0 and 1. Okay. So it satisfies this. Okay. So what we will get, so given this, we will have, this is equal to 2 e power minus 2n epsilon squared by b minus a. B minus a is 1 minus 0 whole squared. So that is this. Okay. So
what were a and b?
Yeah. So a and b are like, what is the range between which my random variable falls? So loss function is 0, 1. So my random variable, which is r of h, right? So sorry, rn hat of h, that is what is random. Mu is not, yeah. This random, since L itself is between 0, 1, whatever I am measuring empirically also lies between 0, 1.
But isn't the random variable in this case? Oh, achha. No, the Rn hat is a real value. How is it between 0 and 1?
No, because for a classifier, if we use 0, 1 loss, okay, so for a particular, so any loss function you use, if you then it will change. But if I use a 0, 1 loss function, suppose, okay, suppose L is 0, 1. So right, if I choose a 0, 1 loss function, the maximum error that I can make is going to lie between 0 and 1, right?
Oh, risk is the expected loss, and achha,
Yeah,
understood.
Yeah. So risk will represent, so when you choose the 0-1 loss, the risk will be representing your data error. What is the probability that you make an error, right? So that is also going to be 0-1, between 0-1. So as a result, you can bound P of E1 by this. Even if you choose some other loss function, it is always bounded. Okay, so you will not have a case where this is unbounded, simply because that is quite unrealistic. Even in regression, what you can do is you can put some kind of bound within which all your data samples fall. Okay, so it's otherwise, if it falls too high, the probability will be negligible. So in that sense, you can bind it. Okay, but we are not going into the theory of this kind of a discussion. But for a simplistic case, the most simple case with a 0-1 loss function, this is always true, and we are able to bind P of E1. So let me copy this over so I will just take 5 more minutes and I'll finish this, and then we will start something else next week. Okay, so. Okay, so I hope all of you are convinced how this is happening. This is just through Hofding. Yeah, somebody has a question? Okay, so now we wanted to bind this. We have bounded one of them. Okay, so now if you take, let me just let me describe what is called as union bound. So suppose there are 3 events A, B, and C. Probability of A union B union C is less than or equal to probability of A plus probability of B plus probability of C. Right? So what does that mean? Suppose you have the Venn diagram like this. This is my A, this is B, this is C. Okay, A union B union C is the shaded region, the entire thing. Right? So you can clearly see that A union B union C is less than P of A plus P of B plus P of C. Okay, so now P on each of these P of E1 complement is less than 2 e power this. So similarly, P of E2 complement is also less than this, right? All of them are less than 2 e power minus 2n epsilon square, right? So now when you want to bound this, the supremum, what you can do, you can just use union bound. So what that gives us is that probability that supremum H belonging to H. Okay, so this is again, remember, we are in the finite world. Okay, the first bag that we have chosen was finite. Okay, so here what we have, R of H1, R of H, Rn of hat of H minus R of H greater than epsilon is going to be less than 2m e power minus 2n epsilon squared. Okay. So now, does that mean we can control this? Yes, because suppose someone gives you epsilon, for all epsilon and delta, someone gives you, I have to find an n, right? So what we need to do is fix your delta to be equal to 2m e power minus 2n epsilon squared. The only thing that is uncertain is this n, right? So this is what we want to evaluate. So the point where the boundary where this is happening, from then onwards, if you increase, it will only help. So if I have to evaluate what n is required, what I will do is for the n where it is equal to this, that is the n, because beyond that, when I increase n, this will anyway become the delta is some number, right? So once that other number will be even smaller. Okay. Right? See, you need that. Yeah. So this has to be true for all. Yeah. So So if you remember the expression, right? For all epsilon and delta, what we need was the probability that supremum H belonging to H, Rn hat of H minus R of H greater than epsilon. This should be less than delta for all n greater than n equal to n. Right? So what I'm saying is, As you increase n, anyway this delta will decrease because this n will become more and more. So for n equal to n plus 1, this will be even smaller. Okay, so that is from certain n onwards it is true. So for the boundary case, what you can do is you can fix delta equal to this. Okay, this implies that n is equal to, what does it do? So n is equal to ln 1 over, okay, so delta by 2m. Delta by 2m, I have to do this properly, delta by 2m, okay. Okay, so I have to do this slowly. So let's just do it in the next sheet. So e power, so we will write this as delta is equal to 2m e power minus 2n epsilon squared plus 2n epsilon squared. Then e power 2n epsilon squared is equal to 2m by delta. Okay, so 2n epsilon squared is equal to ln 2m by delta. Epsilon, n is equal to 1 over 2 epsilon squared ln 2m by delta. Okay, so this is the n that I can give as an answer for the epsilon and delta that you have given me. Okay, and the m, capital M, represents how many classifiers are there in my bag. As m increases, my number n also increases. Okay, so let me again quickly summarize this and we will stop.
Sir,
Yeah.
sir, before as we increase the value of n, delta, the value of delta decreases.
No, so what? Okay, so delta is fixed first of all. Okay, delta is not going to change. Okay, so in the boundary, what I'm saying is that in the boundary, this delta is equal to this. But when I change n to n plus 1, this is the actual error that will be lower than delta.
So could you repeat that last?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is you have all the samples, right? So this is your number of samples. So this is my n. At this value, I'm equal to delta. Okay, but at n plus 1, delta is going to be bigger than this. So I'm anyway going to be smaller than this. Right?
Understood.
So from n onwards, I should be having this. So that is all I'm saying.
Understood.
Okay. So let me just quickly summarize and we will stop. Okay. So I think there was a good lot of discussion. I think it's pretty useful. Most of you should have gotten it clear. Otherwise, there is always lectures notes for you to, I mean, the lecture video is there for you to see. So what we were really studying is how do we ensure that we are able to learn? Is learning feasible? That is the whole question that we were studying. Okay, and the first thing that we said is that the class of bag that I am working with, that should be well behaved, in the sense you can bind it uniformly in this manner. Okay, so here for any epsilon delta, so this is like control, right? So if I give low value of epsilon and delta, I'm expecting too many things from my classifier bag, right? So classifier bag has to be well behaved. In that sense, consistency is kind of expected. If the whole bag is well behaved, then hopefully the consistency is achieved, right? So now towards that, what we said is that first let us take a finite bag. Suppose h is equal to h1 to hm. Okay, and if there is finite number of bags, so we had a large discussion on what it means to say probability of supremum is greater than epsilon. And hopefully I convinced you that this is equal to probability of the union. It doesn't matter which classifier makes an error at what points. Overall, it should be considered in the supremum. Even if there are two bigger than epsilon, it will be captured here, right? So in that sense, this is captured properly. So the Venn diagram here helps. So these are all the space where errors are happening. Okay, so in that sense, this should be okay, or this for loop, if that helps. So then we used Hofding inequality, which is using basically the boundedness of a random variable between B and A. So we use that to get a better inequality than Chebyshev. Chebyshev has another problem. We require the knowledge of variance. Okay, that's again problem because we don't even know expectation of X. So how do we get variance? So instead of that, we used Hofding, which is a much stronger thing because e power n comes in the denominator. So this grows, this falls much more rapidly, right? So using that and the union bound that we discussed, what we said is that for any epsilon and delta, I will be able to produce an n where as long as I have samples more than n, I will get an error lower than delta. The reason being, when I solve for n equal to delta, that is the boundary. And as soon as I cross that boundary, my error will be even lower. Okay, so in that sense, we are achieving it. So what is the whole summary? For a finite bag, we can achieve it. That is the whole summary of this discussion. Okay, so let me just stop here. I will be around for questions and we can discuss some of these things in more detail if someone has any more questions. Otherwise, we will stop here. So thanks everybody for attending. I think that was useful. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.